Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. The Curious Concoction. In the dim glow of his laboratory, where shadows danced upon the walls, and the only sound was the distant echo of Big Ben striking midnight, Dr. Henry Jekyll sat alone, contemplating the duality of man. The room was cluttered with glassware and papers, a testament to his relentless pursuit of knowledge. A single lamp cast a pale light over his workbench, illuminating the vial that held his future. Dr. Jekyll's obsession with his inner conflict had roots in his youth, where he first tasted the forbidden fruit of transgression, leading to a life riddled with secret indulgences. It was during his time at university, under the tutelage of his mentor, Professor Lanyon, that he first voiced his controversial theories on the human psyche. Lanyon, a man of science yet firm in moral standings, had warned Jekyll of the perils of tampering with the very fabric of one's soul. "Henry, you tread a dangerous path," Lanyon had said. "The consequences of such an experiment could be dire." Ignoring the cautionary words, Jekyll's hands shook as he consumed the potion, his heart racing with anticipation and dread. As the concoction took effect, he felt his body convulse, a searing pain ripping through him as if his very essence was being torn asunder. His vision blurred, and he heard the sound of his own voice, now a gut. Tural, sinister laugh, echoing in the darkness. His clothes felt loose, his muscles shrinking as his body contorted into a new form. The mirror reflected an unrecognizable figure, with dark, eager eyes. A malicious grin. Mr. Hyde had emerged, liberated from the confines of Dr. Jekyll's reputation. Hyde reveled in his newfound autonomy, feeling a rush of power and freedom as he stepped out into the night. The city's shadows welcomed him, and he moved with a purposeful stride, eager to explore the depths of his character that he had long denied. As the night wore on, Hyde's actions grew bolder, his cruelty more pronounced. With each misdeed, he felt a rush of exhilaration, a confirmation of the power he wielded without consequence. But as dawn approached, a sense of dread settled in. Hyde knew the potion's effects would soon wear off, and he would have to face Dr. Jekyll's reality once again. With the first light of morning, Hyde returned to the laboratory, his mind a whirlwind of dark thoughts. He reached for the vial, desperate to maintain his freedom, but found it empty. Panic set in as he felt the transformation reversing, his body reshaping into Dr. Jekyll's form. Dr. Jekyll awoke with a start, his heart pounding. The memories of the night flooded back, each one a stab of guilt and fear. "What have I unleashed?" he whispered, the weight of his actions bearing down on him. He knew he had to find a way to control Hyde to prevent further destruction and chaos. But as he looked around his cluttered laboratory, he realized that he was trapped in a cycle of creation and destruction, forever bound to the monster he had unleashed upon the world. The emergence of Hyde. As Mr. Hyde, he stepped out into the night, ready to unleash his newfound persona on the world. The streets of London were alive with the sounds of nightfall. Carriages clattered over the cobblestones, and the gas lamps cast a dim glow on the faces of passers-by. Mr. Hyde moved through the shadows, his senses heightened, taking in every detail of the world around him. As he turned down an alley, a cat screeched and bolted away from him. Hyde chuckled at the creature's instinctive fear. "Smart beast," he murmured, his voice a low growl. Further down the alley, he encountered a group of rowdy youths, laughing and jesting among themselves. They stopped when they saw Hyde, their laughter dying in their throats as they took in his sinister appearance. "What do we have here?" one of the youths sneered, trying to mask his unease with bravado. "A lost soul wandering the night?" Hyde's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Not lost," he replied, his voice dripping with malice. "I am merely a traveler, delving into the unseen corners of this city, seeking the thrills that lurk in the shadows." The youths exchanged nervous glances, sensing the danger that this man represented. One by one, they backed away, their false bravado crumbling in the face of Hyde's imposing presence. Hyde watched them go, his smile growing wider as he savored the thrill of intimidation. He continued down the alley, his footsteps echoing off the walls as he searched for his next conquest. The night air was alive with possibilities, and Mr. Hyde was determined to explore every dark and sinister corner of it. The first misdeed. The streets of London bustled, but an evening's unease loomed. Mr. Edward Hyde, on an amble, fixed his piercing gaze upon Sir Danvers Carew, an elderly gentleman crossing his path. Hyde's twisted smile foretold dark intentions. "Good evening, sir," Sir Danvers offered politely, tipping his hat. Hyde's reply was violent and swift. He lashed out, striking Sir Danvers across the face, knocking him to the ground. "What's this about, you fiend?" Sir Danvers demanded, attempting to rise. Hyde, merciless, unleashed a frenzied attack, his fists and feet battering the old man. The sickening sounds of breaking bones and Sir Danvers' pained cries echoed through the street. Passers-by froze, paralyzed by fear as Hyde's fury unleashed. Finally spent, Hyde rose, his victim lay broken. Hyde, satisfied, watched the police arrive, a cold pleasure washing over him. He had executed the perfect crime. The murder of Carew. The psychological landscape of the murder of Carew is a complex tapestry woven with the threads of duality and morality. Dr. Jekyll's internal struggle is a poignant reflection of the human condition, where the battle between the idea and the superego is relentless. The transformation from Jekyll to Hyde and back is not merely physical, but symbolic of the metamorphosis of the soul, a Jekyllian attempt to reconcile the irreconcilable. Hyde's actions are not his alone. They are the manifestation of Jekyll's darkest desires, unshackled from the chains of societal expectation. The aftermath of Sir Danvers Carew's demise is not just the cessation of a life, but the disintegration of the moral compass that guides Jekyll. The investigation that ensues is a mere formality, for the true inquiry is within the recesses of Jekyll's tormented psyche. Mr. Utterson and Dr. Lanyon stand as pillars of reason amidst the chaos, yet their involvement only serves to highlight the futility of logic when pitted against the primal forces of the human spirit. The revelation of the connection between Jekyll and Hyde is a moment of tragic enlightenment, laying bare the eternal struggle between good and evil that resides within us all. The societal implications are profound, for they mirror the dichotomy of the Victorian era. A facade of respectability veiling a seething undercurrent of depravity and vice. In the wake of the murder, the city's facade of order is shattered, revealing the fragility of the social order. Jekyll's plight is emblematic of the era's anxieties, a microcosm of the fear that beneath the veneer of civilization lies a beast within us all. As the narrative unfolds, the reader is compelled to confront the unsettling truth that the line between man and monster is perilously thin, and that perhaps the real horror is not the act of murder itself, but the ease with which the human soul can be corrupted. The struggle within. Dr. Henry Jekyll sat in his dimly lit study, the weight of his secret bearing down on him like the thick London fog outside his window. The room was silent except for the soft crackle of the fireplace and the occasional turn of a page as Jekyll pored over his notes, desperate for a solution to his predicament. Hyde must be suppressed, he muttered to himself, his hands trembling slightly. I cannot let him roam free, not after Carew. Jekyll shook his head, trying to dispel the intrusive thoughts. No, you are everything I fear, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. You are chaos, destruction, a murderer. The internal battle raged on as Jekyll's once clear moral compass spun wildly, the lines between right and wrong blurring with each passing moment. He knew he couldn't go on like this, living two lives, each at war with the other. It was only a matter of time before one would take over completely, and the thought chilled him to the bone. Jekyll's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden pain that gripped him, a familiar and unwelcome sensation. Not now, he gasped, clutching at the edges of his desk. The room spun as he fought against the change. He moved towards the door, ready to embrace the night. But as he reached for the handle, a wave of guilt washed over him. The guilt that surged through him was a stark reminder of the man he once was, a man of conscience and duty. It was a sensation that Hyde could not fully comprehend, yet it anchored him momentarily in Jekyll's world. With a snarl of defiance, Hyde shook off the feeling, his resolve hardening. The night beckoned with its shadowy promises, and Hyde, with a sense of inevitability, stepped out into the darkness, leaving the safety of the study behind. The city awaited, unaware of the creature that now walked its streets, free from the constraints of morality and humanity. Utterson's Quest. In the quiet of his study, Mr. Gabriel John Utterson, a lawyer of grave countenance, sat pondering over the strange will of his good friend, Dr. Henry Jekyll. The will left everything to a Mr. Edward Hyde upon Jekyll's death or disappearance. "Jekyll, what have you entangled yourself with?" Utterson muttered to himself. The lawyer's quest for answers began with a visit to Dr. Hasty Lanyon, an old friend of both Utterson and Jekyll. Lanyon had fallen out with Jekyll over what he called unscientific balderdash. "I wish Jekyll would drop these madcap theories and return to proper science," Lanyon remarked. Utterson's determination to uncover the truth only grew stronger. The next morning he paid a visit to Poole, Dr. Jekyll's loyal servant. "Poole, I need your help," Utterson said, sitting beside the man. "Tell me everything you know about Mr. Hyde and Dr. Jekyll's recent activities." Poole hesitated before speaking of strange noises and unexplained absences that hung over the house like a pall. As Utterson listened intently, he knew he had to tread carefully. Utterson's eyes narrowed as he took in every detail of Poole's hesitant words. He sensed that the servant knew more than he was letting on, but Utterson also understood the fear that gripped Poole's heart. With a reassuring pat on the shoulder, Utterson rose from his seat, his mind already racing ahead to the next step in uncovering the truth behind Jekyll's strange behavior and his connection to the enigmatic Mr. Hyde. The revelation. The gas lamps flickered in the foggy London evening as Mr. Utterson walked briskly towards Dr. Jekyll's residence. His mind heavy with concern, the lawyer had pieced together the unsettling clues: the altered voice from Jekyll's study, Hyde's key to the doctor's door, and the man's hideous appearance. Each detail pointed to a sinister truth that Utterson could scarcely believe. Upon arriving, he was greeted by Poole, Jekyll's loyal but visibly shaken servant. "Mr. Utterson, sir, I fear there's something dreadful afoot," Poole whispered, leading him through the dimly lit corridors. They stopped before the study door, where a voice responded to their calls. "Who are you?" Utterson demanded, his voice steady despite the chill running down his spine. Utterson turned to Poole, his eyes narrowing. "We must break down the door," he said resolutely. With a few strong blows, the door gave way, revealing the disheveled room and the figure of Mr. Hyde, who cowered in the corner, his eyes wild with fear and desperation. "Where is Dr. Jekyll?" Utterson asked, stepping forward. Utterson's heart sank as he realized the man before him was the very cause of his friend's disappearance. "What have you done with him?" he pressed, his voice a mix of anger and dread. Hyde looked up, his face contorted in a grimace. Utterson recoiled in horror, recognizing the manifestation of Jekyll's inner turmoil. "I'm not one of these." Hyde's voice, filled with a mixture of guilt and sorrow, broke the silence. "The evil consumed him," Hyde whispered, his words carrying a weight of confession. "It was stronger than he anticipated, and in the end there was nothing left but me." The room fell silent once more, the distant echo of carriage wheels on cobblestones intruding upon the heavy atmosphere. Utterson's mind raced as he processed the implications of Hyde's words. With a sense of duty, he prepared to take the necessary steps to unveil the truth about Dr. Jekyll's tragic experiment, determined to preserve the dignity of his old friend, even in the face of such a shocking revelation. As he turned to leave, the weight of what he had discovered seemed to press down upon him. The story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde would forever serve as a cautionary tale, a stark warning against tampering with the very nature of humanity. The downfall. The lab was silent except for the soft bubbling of the concoction on the burner. Dr. Jekyll stood over it, his hands trembling as he added the final ingredient. The liquid turned a deep crimson, and he knew it was ready. With a heavy heart, he drank it down, feeling the familiar rush of transformation. "Jekyll, what have you done?" whispered Utterson, who had quietly entered the room. Jekyll's eyes, now those of Hyde, glinted maliciously. Utterson stepped back, his heart pounding. The streets of London had never felt so ominous. People whispered of the monster that lurked in the shadows, the one responsible for the unspeakable crime against Sir Danvers Carew. They locked their doors and shuttered their windows, praying Hyde would not come for them next. In the lab, Hyde reveled in his newfound dominance. One night, Hyde wandered through the deserted streets. He eventually returned to his lab, where he took his own life, leaving behind the legacy of Dr. Jekyll's tragic experiment. The city awoke to the news of Hyde's demise, and slowly, life returned to normal. But the story of Jekyll and Hyde would live on, a haunting reminder of the battle between good and evil. The legacy of Dr. Jekyll. In his laboratory's quiet, Dr. Henry Jekyll sat at his desk, candlelight casting shadows. His hands trembled as he wrote his confession, the weight of his actions heavy upon him. "I have walked a path fraught with shadows," he wrote, "and now I am lost in the darkness of my own creation." The door opened, and Mr. Utterson stepped in, concern on his face. "Henry, what is this talk of darkness? You are a man of science." Jekyll looked up, his eyes empty. "Gabriel, I have unleashed a horror. Hyde, he is part of me." Utterson was shocked. "Hyde? How can this be?" "It was the potion," Jekyll whispered. "It split my soul, gave life to my darkest desires. Hyde is what I have suppressed." "Why create such a monster?" Utterson asked, sitting beside him. "I sought freedom from morality and law, but did not foresee the cost. Hyde grew stronger and I weaker," Jekyll said. Utterson reassured him. "You are still here, Henry. There is time to make things right." Jekyll shook his head. "No, Hyde will not be caged. The only way to end this is for me to end." Utterson stood, determined. "I will not let you face this alone." But it was too late. The sound of shattering glass filled the room as Jekyll transformed before Utterson's eyes. The respected doctor became Edward Hyde, twisted with malice. "There is no redemption for me," Hyde declared, his eyes gleaming with a cruel satisfaction. Utterson, though horrified, stood his ground. "This is not the end, Henry. I will not abandon you to this fate." Hyde laughed, a sound devoid of humanity. "Foolish Utterson, there is no Henry. Only the freedom of my reign." With a swift movement, Hyde vanished into the night, leaving Utterson alone with the broken remnants of his friend's noble intentions. The legacy of Dr. Jekyll's struggle against his darker self would echo through time, a cautionary tale of the battle within. Reflections of Utterson. In the quiet of his study, Mr. Utterson sat pondering the tumultuous events that had unfolded. The room was filled with the soft ticking of the clock and the rustling of papers as he revisited the letters of Dr. Jekyll. "Hyde, Hyde, Hyde," he muttered under his breath. Utterson's thoughts were interrupted by a gentle knock on the door. It was Poole, Jekyll's loyal butler. "Mr. Utterson, sir, I thought you might need some company," Poole said, stepping into the room. "Thank you, Poole. Your presence is a comfort in these trying times." Utterson managed a weak smile. The two men sat in silence before Utterson spoke again. "Poole, have you ever considered the nature of good and evil? How one man could harbor such extremes within himself?" "I have, sir. It's a troubling thought. Dr. Jekyll was a good man, But that Hyde, he was something else entirely. Poole nodded solemnly. Yes, indeed, Utterson continued, gazing into the flickering flames of the fireplace. It's as if Hyde was the dark shadow that lurked in every corner of Jekyll's soul, waiting to be set free. And once unleashed, he took hold with such ferocity that even Jekyll couldn't reclaim himself. It was a shock to us all, sir, to think that the same hands that cared for the sick could cause such harm. Poole shifted uncomfortably. It's a stark reminder, Poole, that within each of us lies the capacity for both great good and great evil. It's the choices we make that define which path we tread. Utterson nodded. The butler stood, his expression solemn. If I may say so, sir, you've done everything in your power to help the doctor. No one could have foreseen the depths of this tragedy. Perhaps, Utterson conceded, but it doesn't ease the burden of knowing that my friend suffered such an internal torment. If only I had seen the signs earlier. As the night wore on, the two men shared their memories of Dr. Jekyll, each reflection a piece of the puzzle that was his life. And as the first light of dawn crept through the window, Mr. Utterson made a silent vow to honor his friend's legacy by seeking